Welcome back. You're watching America Votes 2016, the live coverage of the U.S. presidential election here on Channels Television. Of course, we've been going from our studio here in Lagos to our correspondents in New York, in Washington, D.C., and of course, our correspondents over there at Victoria Island, where the U.S. consulate is also having an all-night event, you know, tracking the United States presidential election. And here in the studio we have our guests, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze and Mr. Muyiwa Shoba. Both of them are legal practitioners, and they've also had extensive practice in the United States as well. Well, before we took the reports from our correspondents, we're actually looking at the Obama legacy. I think at the moment too, we should also be talking about, you know, what Maria, talked about, the issue of race in the elections. I mean, the African Americans, the blacks, so to say, and the Hispanics, and of course they're weighing in on the equation.
Now, just before we go to a report that we have on that, I'm going to ask you, what impact do you think African Americans will have on this election?
Well, in those states, the states that are in play, I mean, if you remember Obama's presidency candidacy brought out the best out of these African Americans, because it saw a legacy, they saw something different, it saw something historical. So they came out in those, but in places like North Carolina, yes, they will have an impact if they come out, okay, as they did during Obama's presidency. Places like in Pennsylvania, yes, they can have an impact. Even in Ohio, Michigan, yes, they will have an impact if they can come out, and that is the issue. Whether they will come out. Philadelphia is big. I mean, if they come out in front of Philadelphia and surrounding areas of Pennsylvania is gone to Clinton. So I think Clinton and Obama knew that, and that's why they put the effort to, at the end of the campaign, to actually drag all these stars out, to encourage them, to work with them. So if we see a higher turnout from them, yes, fine. The Latinos, the Hispanics, the same thing. Like in places like Nevada, Florida, Miami. I mean, we're talking about Dade County. There's Miami. I mean, heavy Cuban presence over there. Even in North Carolina, yes, you have Latinos there too. So if they come out, they can kind of sway the election. And because of what Donald Trump said about immigrants, they are all coming out because they are afraid of the war and they're afraid of being deported.
Now, but from what our correspondent has told us, it does seem as if the numbers of African Americans voting in this election has dwindled compared to that of 2008, when they all voted massively for Barack Obama. Now, she talked about the fact that they are angry, about the number of African Americans that have been killed, by the police and even by ordinary Americans on the streets. Now, one of the things President Barack Obama tried to achieve while in office was tighter gun control laws, which he couldn't achieve because he couldn't get the backing of Congress.
Yes.
Now, how would a Trump presidency or even a Clinton presidency, go about this issue? Go about solving this issue?
From the African American angle or from the gun angle? In any case, let's take them one by one. From the African American angle, or let's say the minority races, Marco Rubio, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, is a Cuban by birth, and with his influence, he's a Republican. One cannot write off the performance of the Republican Party in Florida. So, the Latinos, majority of them will vote for Clinton. But considering the national average.
Now, I'm going to put you on hold there so that we can talk to the VOA's Doc Bernard, who joins us live from Washington, D.C. Doc, thank you so much for joining us on the program. So, Okay, so Doc, just bring us up to speed on what's happening over there.
So at this point, there's probably been about 18 states that have been called either for Mr. Trump or for Secretary Clinton. Most of these states are really not surprises. At this point, VOA is calculating that Secretary Clinton has about 104 electoral votes and that Mr. Trump has 140 electoral votes. Now, that said, we are still waiting for really the jackpot of the evening. Those states, those battleground states, states like Pennsylvania, Florida, Virginia, even New Hampshire, Michigan to some degree, these states have become very competitive. Looking at the numbers right now, they're really very close. North Carolina keeps kind of tottering back and forth between a Clinton and a Trump lead. So I think what we actually may be looking at this point is a bit of a long night. These states may take a while, and it's important to remember that although maybe some have written off his candidacy as not likely or not probable, that it's still possible that Donald Trump could win the presidential election. So we really have to watch this and watch the states as they fall one by one.
Now, earlier, Donald Trump raised fears that the U.S. elections could be rigged. Is he still saying this at this point?
Yeah, you know, he's been raising that for several, maybe about a month now or so. And his campaign has been very quick to say, oh, well, what he's talking about is the media is against him, they're rigging the election against him, that kind of thing. But he has engaged in some, perhaps we just say sort of dark innuendo about possible voter fraud, about possible hacking of the election. Now, these are real concerns. I think voter fraud, you know, people showing up to vote 2, 3, 4 times, I think most states have actually figured out how to winnow that out. It really isn't a problem. But look, our electoral system, everybody you talk to in the cyber world will tell you our system is vulnerable to hacking attacks, and you wouldn't even know it during the election. You would probably only learn that something might have happened after the election, just causing a great deal of confusion. So, but he has been saying again, he may or he may not concede the election if he indeed loses tonight, depending on how he thinks, how fair the election he thinks it went.
Well, Doug, talking about the vulnerability of technology at this point, don't you think, I mean, it can affect either of the two candidates, whether Mr. Trump or Mrs. Clinton?
Well, it could affect either one of them. And the key thing is, you know, people will say there are 50 states that are running each of these elections in their 50 states, and there are many, many precincts within each of those states. So there's no way that anybody could possibly corrupt or tamper with all of those machines. That's probably very, very true. But you really don't need to tamper with that many machines. If you targeted real sort of battleground counties in battleground states, potentially, and could shift the votes, or at the very worst, or at the very least, kind of create a muddle, kind of create confusion and doubt among voters about the legitimacy of their vote. I think that's a real genuine concern. Now, we haven't seen any of that so far. I don't know that we're expecting it, but again, that's something to be looking for probably tomorrow and in the days to come.
Now, Doug, I remember that Donald Trump asked some Clinton supporters who might be suffering from voters' remorse, you know, to come out on election day and change their votes. That's for those that voted early. Now, do you know perhaps if anyone actually did that?
Well, we don't know. This is what we do know. There was a record number of either early voting or absentee voting. Some 46 million ballots were cast before Election Day even rolled around. That is a record. 37 states plus the District of Columbia allow early voting, and a lot of people took advantage of that. Now, some states actually do allow a voter, if they've cast their ballot early voting or absentee. A few states allow that voter to show up on Election Day and say, you know what, I changed my mind, I want to change my vote. Not many states do that, and we just don't know that many people have been doing that. At this point, I tend to think that that's probably not really a factor. But clearly what is a factor is this enormous number of early votes, and we don't really have a sense as to who was voting or who they were casting their ballots for, but clearly something was going on.
Well, I'd like to look at the emotional side of things, Doug. I mean, for the average American, what do you think, or what would you say was the strongest motivating factor, to encourage them to come out to cast their ballots?
Exhaustion. I think many Americans, I don't think I'm going out on a limb or making a hyperbolic statement here. I think many Americans are simply exhausted from this campaign. It's been about 18 months since the first candidates announced last year in 2015, and it's been a long and it's been a hard campaign. And so I think people are tired. I think they perhaps maybe aren't necessarily, some of them aren't really enthused about casting their ballot. Some are. Clearly there's a core of supporters for Donald Trump and a core of supporters for Hillary Clinton, and they're all enthused and ready to cast their ballot. But I tend to think that a lot of Americans are just really exhausted by this whole process. They really almost want it to go away. And of course, once the vote is over, it really won't go away. It's only a few months, if that, before the next president steps into office, and all of that political animus comes to the fore again.
Well, would there be a deadline as to when we should be expecting the entirety of the results? I mean, can we project when we'll be having all of them in from this point?
Yeah. That's a tricky question. It's just before, it's 9:45 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States, or at least on the East Coast of the United States. I was just talking with our senior national correspondent, Jim Malone. He looked at me and he gave me this look and he said, "This is going to be a long night." And he didn't look like he was enthused about it. So I think it's going to be a long night for all of us and for the country. We may not even know by maybe as late as 1 a.m. or maybe even 2 a.m., depending on how the vote in those key battleground states plays out.
So another tricky question, Doug. Who are you rooting for in this election?
I'm rooting for the American public, and I'm rooting for the democratic system. It's, many people I think have kind of tried to criticize it. There's been some sense that maybe even Russia has been trying to sort of, cast aspersions, say, well, American democracy isn't that great. See, they have all these problems and this and that and the other, and kind of, again, create a sort of a confusion or doubt or just sort of a lingering malaise, perhaps, in people about the system. But I can tell you, I mean, I got up this morning, I went to cast my vote. It felt great. Everything worked. You see so many friends saying the same thing. So, what I'm pulling for in this place is not just the American public, but really that American democratic system. And here's to that, and let's strengthen it.
Well, a very diplomatic answer, Doug Bernard. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much.
Well, we'll take a break, and when we return, we'll be continuing our coverage of the U.S. election 2016. Don't go away.